The tiredness you feel doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't crash in or announce itself as exhaustion. It moves quietly, almost politely, through the edges of your day. You may notice it as a dulling rather than a collapse, a sense that things still function, but without resonance, as if life continues, yet something intimate has thinned. This kind of fatigue is easy to dismiss. It doesn't interrupt productivity. It doesn't demand attention. And because of that, it often goes unnamed. But it is not nothing. It shows up as a low pressure behind the eyes, as a subtle distance between you and what you're doing, as the feeling that even rest hasn't quite reached you. Sleep happens, but restoration doesn't fully arrive. Silence appears, yet something inside remains slightly unsettled. This is not burnout, and it is not a failure of resilience. It is the natural consequence of attention living outward for too long without return. Nothing has gone wrong. When attention is repeatedly drawn away from center, it doesn't disappear. It disperses. It spreads across surfaces, responsibilities, impressions, conversations, decisions. And when attention disperses, presence becomes diffuse. You can still move, you can still decide, you can still respond, but the sense of being with yourself becomes faint. This is what you may be sensing now. Not loss, not damage, just spread. What matters here is not correction and not recovery, because nothing needs to be repaired. There is a difference between something being broken and something being scattered. Broken things require fixing. Scattered things require gathering. And gathering does not happen through effort. Notice how the body is already still beneath whatever movement continues. Even as thought moves, something deeper does not. Even as attention flickers, something remains unmoved. You are not entirely in motion. You never were. There is a center that does not rush to meet experience. It does not chase clarity. It does not hurry to resolve sensation. Experience passes through it. It does not follow experience outward. This center is not created through practice. It is not generated by discipline. It does not strengthen through repetition. It is structural. Like the way a room remains even as people enter and leave. The walls do not lean toward the noise. The ceiling does not adjust to activity. The space holds without effort. You are built this way. The quiet fatigue you feel is not asking for rest in the usual sense. It is not asking for withdrawal or escape. It is asking for coherence, not accumulation, not stimulation, but regathering. And regathering begins when attention is no longer pulled forward. You do not need to bring yourself inward. There is nothing to pull back. There is nothing to retrieve. You only need to stop leaning outward. Notice how even the attempt to relax introduces strain. Notice how trying to settle the mind creates another task. Notice how effort subtly keeps attention outside itself. Nothing here requires effort. There is already a quiet gravity present. You can feel it as steadiness rather than heaviness, as a gentle weight that does not press but holds. It does not ask you to focus. It does not ask you to breathe differently. It does not ask you to change your posture or your state. It is already functioning. The more simply it is allowed, the more clearly it reveals itself. You may notice that the need to understand begins to soften here. Questions lose urgency. Edges blur slightly. not because answers are missing, but because they are no longer required. This is not absence, it is containment. A state where nothing spills outward, where attention is no longer leaking through anticipation, explanation, or interpretation. In containment, something subtle reorganizes, not through instruction, through permission. The body knows how to return to its own center when it is not being managed. The mind knows how to quiet when it is not being directed. Awareness knows how to rest when it is not being used. You are not behind. You are not depleted. You are not unfinished. You are simply noticing what it feels like when dispersion begins to resolve. This is not a peak. It is not a breakthrough. It is not a moment to hold on to. It is a return to what has been present the entire time. There is nothing to stabilize here, nothing to sustain, nothing to maintain. The center does not require protection. It does not weaken when attention moves outward again. It does not fade when life becomes active. It remains. And because it remains, there is no urgency to stay here, no pressure to deepen, no requirement to preserve the feeling. Let it be quiet. Let it be unremarkable. Let it pass unnoticed if it wants to. The return does not depend on recognition. It only depends on not interfering. Nothing further is required in this moment. Nothing needs to conclude. Nothing needs to be resolved. This is enough. What remains after the return is not something new. It is what was left untouched while everything else moved. You may notice that nothing dramatic follows this gathering, no surge of clarity, no emotional shift that announces completion, just a quiet sense of being located again. This is important. The mind often expects return to feel like improvement, like something has been gained. But true return feels more like subtraction, less commentary, less urgency, less need to mark the moment. The center does not reward attention. It does not respond with reassurance. It does not confirm itself through sensation. It simply remains available. As activity resumes, you may notice that the pull outward no longer carries the same momentum. Tasks still appear, thoughts still form, decisions still happen, but they no longer pull the whole of you forward. Something stays behind, not in resistance, not in withdrawal, just not fully recruited. This is how coherence expresses itself, not as stillness replacing movement, but as movement no longer scattering what is essential. There is a quiet difference between engagement and dispersion. Engagement allows return. Dispersion does not. You can feel this difference without naming it. It appears as a subtle continuity through activity, a sense that even while attention moves, presence does not dissolve. Nothing needs to be held in place to maintain this. Holding introduces tension. Preservation introduces effort. The center does not need maintenance. It is not a fragile state that collapses when ignored. It is structural. It is there whether you notice it or not. When attention moves outward again, it moves from center rather than away from it. This distinction matters. Life does not ask you to stay inward. It does not ask you to remain quiet. It does not ask you to protect this orientation. It only asks that you stop abandoning yourself while moving. You may notice that even distraction now feels different, less consuming, less absorbing, as if it happens on the surface rather than at the core. This does not mean distraction disappears. It means it no longer defines the whole field. The center remains unoccupied. Nothing enters it, nothing leaves it. And because nothing is required to maintain it, there is no anxiety about losing it. This is why return cannot be turned into practice. Practice implies effort, repetition, improvement. The center does not improve. It is already complete. When the impulse to do something with this arises, notice it gently. Not to stop it, not to suppress it, just to see how quickly effort tries to follow clarity. Effort is familiar. Effort feels responsible. Effort feels like participation. But participation here is unnecessary. Awareness does not need to be applied. It does not need to be directed. It does not need to be sustained. It knows how to remain without supervision. You may notice that language begins to feel slightly excessive here. Descriptions start to feel unnecessary. Even these words begin to loosen their grip. That is not a problem. Silence is not the absence of meaning. It is the absence of interference. In silence, nothing has to explain itself. Nothing has to justify its presence. Nothing has to become useful. This is where the return completes itself, not by arriving somewhere, but by no longer moving, not stopping movement, ending departure. There is a subtle dignity in this stillness, not pride, not confidence, just a sense of being settled without needing to claim it. Life continues, noise returns, responsibilities reappear, but something does not leave with them. The center remains untouched by outcome. It does not celebrate success. It does not contract around difficulty. It is not indifferent. It is unentangled. This unentanglement is not cold. It is gentle. It allows feeling without being consumed by it. It allows thought without becoming lost inside it. It allows movement without displacement. Nothing here needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be repeated. When attention disperses again, and it will, return does not require retracing steps. There is no path back. You simply notice where you never stopped standing. This noticing is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not interrupt. It is already enough. Let the moment end without conclusion. Let the quiet remain unmarked. Let nothing be taken from this. No insight is required. No takeaway is needed. No next step follows. The center does not move forward. It does not progress. It remains. And that is sufficient.